My name is Nelson Pedreiro. I'm the Vice President for the Advanced Technology Center. This is where you are. This is our facility. And I want to welcome you to Lockheed Martin. We're here today to celebrate an IEEE Milestone event. We're very excited to be hosting that. And I'd like to kick this off by introducing the Lockheed Martin Space Vice President for Engineering Technology, Tom Alto. Tom has over 30 years of experience in aerospace. He leads an organization with over 10,000 scientists and engineers. That includes the ATC. This whole organization reports into Tom. This talented group of scientists and engineers develop systems that are critical to our nation, from weather satellites to GPS, will probably some of you use to find our facility today, to early warning systems, to deterrent fleet ballistic missile, as well as THAAD missile defense systems. And we've been partners with NASA with every single mission to Mars, so we're very proud of that heritage. So without further delay, Tom, please join us and start our meeting.
Well, thank you for that nice introduction. I'm very proud and honored to be here tonight to celebrate a great milestone and dedication. So good evening and welcome to the IEEE Milestone Dedication Ceremony. Tonight I'm honored to welcome members of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, previous and current DIALOG users and operators, esteemed guests, and my fellow Lockheed Martin employees as we celebrate the historic achievements and technological innovation that has come out of our Palo Alto facility. We're here this evening to commemorate DIALOG, a groundbreaking online search system that was developed right here in 1966 by a small, very talented, led team by Dr. Roger K. Summit, whom I'm excited to welcome back tonight. So thank you for being here. DIALOG was the first interactive online search system preceding major internet search tools by more than 2 decades. And when I think about that, that's pretty impressive. And you think about the powerful search engines today like Google, pretty awesome. That in 1966, that was where that thought process and that capability began. DIALOG speed, ease of use, and wide range of data content attracted a variety of users worldwide, including scientists, attorneys, educators, and librarians. We'll be hearing from Dr. Summit later this evening in a conversation with IEEE Region 6 History Chair Brian Berg, along with 3 former DIALOG employees and 1 early user. Although we're here tonight to honor the historic advancement of the DIALOG system, I want to also note that DIALOG is representative of so much of what we do at Lockheed Martin. We have an incredible legacy of innovation, invention, and problem solving that truly makes a difference for the world, and that's been going on for quite a while. As you know, the work that Roger has done contributes to that. From space exploration and science and weather missions to remote sensing and early warning to global connection and protected communications, our Lockheed Martin teams continuously develop the most complex systems for our nation and our world. And it is a challenging world, as we all know today, and those threats and those challenges continue. Lockheed Martin has been operating in the Bay Area, an area now known worldwide for its leadership in technology and innovation. For more than 60 years. In fact, this Palo Alto facility dates back to 1955, delivering groundbreaking research such as some of the first antennas, communication systems, and instruments to fly in space, as well as support to our national strategic deterrent program and programs like DIALOG. Pretty impressive place when you think about the history and the amount of innovation and creativity that occurred here and still occurs today. Today, our Lockheed Martin team at the Advanced Technology Center continues to bring our legacy into the future with technologies enabling space missions, optics and laser technologies, space security, hypersonics, and artificial intelligence and machine learning. Just as DIALOG remains relevant today, I can't wait to see what the next 50 years brings for our team and the amazing work you all enable every day. With that, thank you again for joining us here tonight. I'd like to welcome and introduce IEEE Region 6 Director, Keith Moore.
Hello everyone, welcome. Just as Tom introduced me, I am Keith Moore. I'm the Region 6 Director for IEEE. I've traveled here from Arizona. I'm part of the Region 6, which is all of the western coast of the United States. But IEEE encompasses the whole world. We are a professional organization that encourages and enables technology for the benefit of humanity. So before we begin, just to break the tension here, because I'm not a great speaker sometimes, and it's great for me to give a little bit of a dumb joke or something to break the tension here. So I looked up a couple of jokes here. The dialogue is certainly a forerunner of the internet, so I looked up dumb internet jokes. So here we go. How do trees get on the internet? They log on. Exactly. Thank you. What snacks do computers like to eat? Chips. Very good. All right, let me begin here. Thank you for the laughs, even though they were very dumb. Okay. Let's see. So I'll get my glasses on here. I just went on my daughter's graduation trip. She wanted to go to Hawaii, so while I was on vacation, I grew out my beard. And that shows my age, but my eyes feel my age all the time, so let me put my goggles on here. So, IEEE glance. So I'm just going to give you a few words here about IEEE and about the Milestone project. I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to give you additional information about that. So today, IEEE is a group of professionals who are engaged in improving global conditions in technology areas. Today, IEEE brand is trusted and recognized as a global enabler of innovation, a provider of collaborative and research resources for those building our future, and an invaluable membership organization that enables technology and career advancement. IEEE has a number of annual conferences each year. We have innovators that come to IEEE conference to share, collaborate, and investigate the latest research. We're held by the technical community and for the technical community. Well, we are just basically a big group, a big club of engineers and technologists who get together to do these things together. It's cutting edge people talking about cutting edge topics, providing a means for networking and communication, allowing participants to develop contacts in cross-specialty areas. And for me personally, that's been my biggest motivation for IEEE, is getting to go out and meet these people who are working in various different areas. I have to say, working for the U.S. government as I do, I work for the U.S. Army in Fort Worth, Arizona, and like I say, meeting folks here in California and across the world, Lockheed Martin and other great organizations that work for technology and doing it for the benefit of humanity, and that's the main reason I'm involved in IEEE, and I hope all the others that are involved in IEEE do the same, and for the same reasons. Each year, over 100,000 technical professionals attend more than 1,800 conferences sponsored by IEEE. From microelectronics to microwaves to sensors and security, IEEE conferences cover relevant topics that showcase the depth and breadth of members' technical fields. In recent years, IEEE has also reached out in humanitarian topics. We have recently, in 2016, established the Humanitarian Activities Committee. I was also the chair. I was very benefited to be the chair of the Global Humanitarian Technology Conference, which has been held in Seattle and San Jose. And it's a great conference where people come together to benefit and develop technologies ranging numerous topics, but mostly all those that are involved in the United Nations technology topics that they put forward each year. And it ranges from waste disposal to solar power to wind power to food security and medical security. All those topics, we have people come together and present every year. So IEEE has really reached out in the humanitarian space as well. The Special Interest Group on Humanitarian Technology has active groups around the globe working to use technology to improve people's lives. We also reach out in the educational arena. IEEE educational programs enable students and professionals to achieve their goals. The educational programs are part of our commitment to providing members with lifelong continuing education. The Milestone program, let me give you a quick intro to the Milestone program, then Brian will take over and go from there and give you even more detail on that. Funded by donations to IEEE Foundation, which is the branch of IEEE, or the organization of IEEE that takes donations and provides funding for many of the projects that IEEE does. It's administered by the IEEE History Center. The Milestone program recognizes great moments throughout our world's long history of technical innovation. The program began in 1983 as part of the centennial celebration of IEEE's today's milestone as our 194th worldwide, 16th for the Santa Clara Valley section, and 25th for Region 6, which is the Western United States. So the images there, we'll look up there, there's the birthplace of Silicon Valley in 1956. Sorry, thank you.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
I covered the first ones.
Right. Very good. So, thank you, Brian. That's an excellent segue here. So let me give you an introduction, Brian, and I'll sit down and tell dumb jokes. So Brian Berg has been a data storage technologist for over 30 years through his Berg Software Design Consultancy, where his current specialty is flash memory. He works extensively with patents and intellectual property and is the technical chair of the annual Flash Memory Summit. As IEEE's Region 6 History Chair and Milestone Coordinator, Brian has secured milestones for the EEPROM and Flash Memory, the Apple Macintosh, Shaky the Robot, CDMA, and the Apollo 11 Lunar Laser Ranging Experiment. He has assisted with milestones for CP/M, Moore's Law, and Apple I and II, and Doug Engelbart's demo. Brian has a Bachelor's in Mathematics and was a Computer Engineering graduate at Stanford University. Brian, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So thanks, everybody. Happy to be here. Who here loves history? Well, that's like pretty much everybody. Anyway, I love it too. That's why I do this stuff with IEEE. I'm the history chair for the Western U.S. and coordinate milestones, and I just have a great time with it. I just get enthralled. That's a typical kind of books that I like to read and stuff. So I want to quickly tell you about some of the milestones that have been dedicated here in Silicon Valley. On the left here, here's a HP 35. So just down the road, there's a plaque at HP. And actually, HP 45 is something that Steve Wozniak worked on, just a little FYI. Next to that is the Ampex videotape recorder. Ray Dolby worked at Ampex on that project, and that came out and was released in 1956 to a huge round of applause at an event, because people could not believe they could actually record live programs on tape. So it's a very dramatic thing. So I got a milestone about 3 years ago. Next to that is Gary Kildall. He got a milestone for CPM. And next to that is the original planar technology integrated circuit developed by Fairchild. So they got a milestone for that. That was developed in 1959. Going on the bottom line there is Ellie Harari next to, you know, those little micro SD cards that you put in your camera? They're like the size of your fingernail. That's inside of one of those. Those are 16 dies of flash memory along with the controller chip. And so that's just what's inside those. That's how all that memory gets stored. So I worked with Ellie Harari on the first milestone that was dedicated back in 2012. Now, Dialog is 194th. That was one for the floating gate EEPROM that was the birthplace, basically the foundation of flash memory. That was 125th, so there have been about 70 that have been dedicated in the past seven years. Next to that is Doug Engelbart, and he had a demo that was just over 50 years ago in San Francisco, the first public demonstration of a mouse and many other things. Also next to that is the Raymac. That was the first disk drive developed by IBM in downtown San Jose. So, and that's it getting loaded onto a Pan American Airlines airplane. One of the really cool milestones that I worked on, it was dedicated a little over 2 years ago, for Shaky the Robot. Who here has heard about Shaky the Robot? Anyway, Shaky was developed at SRI up in Menlo Park. It was actually an ARPA-funded project, developed between 66 and 72, and had incredible impact on robotics as well as artificial intelligence. And whenever you use Google Maps, you are using an algorithm for mapping that was developed from Shaky the Robot. So that's one of the ways that Shaky Robot has impacted the world. And down here below the picture, by the way, the picture on the left is Shaky itself, and that's actually at the Computer History Museum. To the right of that is a picture of me with a Savioke robot, which is like a third generation Shaky, so to speak, because it was actually at the dedication event at the Computer History Museum a couple of years ago. And so I got to interact with this little robot, and they call it like the great-grandchild of Shaky because it uses the same algorithms. Right below that is a picture of a Mars rover. We mentioned Mars rover earlier. The Mars rover was also directly impacted by Shaky because it's a mapping algorithm that's used by Google Maps and other mapping techniques. It's the same algorithm that's used by all of the Mars rovers in order to navigate on the Martian surface. Now you can imagine you send a rover to Mars. You don't want it to turn over. That is end of life. So it can make very conservative movements on the Martian surface. It uses the Shaky technology, it's called the A-star algorithm, and it uses that in order to determine the best path for it to take so that it will not flip over. And to the right of that is unveiling the plaque for that. We'll be doing that for the Dialogue Milestone a little bit later this evening. Anybody ever drive down San Antonio Road by California Avenue near El Camino? There are 2 milestone plaques down there. If you look on the picture on the left here, there are 2 diodes and 1 transistor. These are representative of devices that produced at Shockley Labs, which is called the birthplace of Silicon Valley because that is the very first place where silicon was produced in Silicon Valley in 1956. Next to that is a picture of Shockley and 2 others who were the co-inventors, Bertain and Bardeen, of the transistor back in 1947 at Bell Labs. And so Shockley came out to Silicon Valley and established Shockley Labs. And also, he was great at finding people. He was terrible at managing people, which is how you got the traitorous 8 who left Shockley and formed Fairchild. And if you look, by the way, just a little more thing. The address 391 down there, they honored the original address of Shockley Labs by putting the address on a new building there with that 391 address. And this is a little kind of a super plaque that's at that location. You actually drive right by it on San Antonio Road. You've probably driven by it many times yourself. But in the upper left is an IEEE Milestone plaque, and there's also other information here on the bottom are all the Fair children. That is all the companies that came out of Fairchild. It's very interesting to check out. Now, if you go to the other side of that same building, you'll find a plaque for Moore's Law on the other side of 391 San Antonio. So here is a silicon molecule, and it's representative of the way silicon works in semiconductor devices. So check that out. It's very interesting. And one that's coming up this summer on August 1st will be the 50th anniversary of the Lunar Laser Ranging Experiment. This is one of 2 experiments that were left by the Apollo 11 astronauts on the lunar surface. One was to measure solar wind. The second one was to allow the distance to the moon to be measured by way of a laser from Earth. So what this was, in the lower part of the picture on the left, is a little box called a retroreflector. It's got 3 mirrors in it that allow you to shine a light in and have the light come out, parallel to the light shining in, but just a few inches away. So from Lick Observatory above San Jose, on August 1st, 1969, a 1.2 gigawatt weapons-grade laser was used to send a signal to the lunar surface, which is a Sea of Tranquility where the Apollo 11 crew landed, and they received back about 5 photons after sending lots of photons up toward the moon. But by measuring the time it took for those 5 photons to go to the moon and back, and using the speed of light, they measured the distance to the moon, which of course changes all the time. And you can still use that same device right now, and people actually do it regularly. In fact, there's even I won't go into details about it, but people do it. So anyway, coming up August 1st, if you're interested in going to another milestone celebration, let me know, because I'm coordinating that one. So, also if you ever go to the Computer History Museum, there's a wall of plaques there. These are duplicate plaques for milestones that have been dedicated in the Valley, and I started a program there to have duplicate plaques set up on that wall that kind of honors IEEE plus the inventions that have occurred here in Silicon Valley. And I think we have Taylor coming up. Interruption. Taylor is the Vice Chair of the Santa Clara Valley section of IEEE. Taylor Mitchell.
We're so grateful to Brian for all the effort that he puts into our milestone program. he's so excited and enthusiastic about all of these historical events that he dredges up. I had never heard of some of them. I had not heard about Dialogue until I went to the History Committee event about a year ago? About a year ago. And I was just delighted to learn about that technology and all the other things, such as Shaky. I do recommend that you take a look if you haven't been to the Computer History Museum. Shaky would be a good reason to go. And he makes it sound like the Savio robot just kind of appeared. No. Brian made that happen. Brian makes these things happen. He finds the speakers and the relevant information. He does the research on such as, can we go back to the prior? Thank you. Such as the upcoming milestone. And I hope to be at that milestone. I don't know if it's going to be at the Lick Observatory, but if so, great. That would be lovely. So in recognition of his contributions for this particular milestone, for the Dialogue Online Search System, 1966, the chair of the IEEE History Committee has put a certificate together for an award for Brian for all the work that he's brought to bringing this milestone to us so that we know more about what this technology was, how it came about. It still works today, and it's been a boon to those who used it initially, and as Brian pointed out, it's still the foundation of a lot of the work that we do today on the internet. So thank you to Brian.
Thank you very much, Taylor. So I would like to introduce really the key guy of the evening. That's Roger Summit. And many of us know Roger, and many of us worked with him. I worked with him, gotten to know him by way of this milestone. Many of you in the audience, how many former employees are in the audience? A whole bunch of you guys. I'm sure you love this man. Anyway, I'm very, very pleased to introduce Roger Summit today. His pioneering work at Lockheed, beginning in '62, led to the creation of Dialogue. And I'm just going to do it from the heart. I've worked with him. There's so many interesting things I've learned about him, the work that he did in the creation of this. He's called maybe the grandfather of Dialogue. That makes him sound old. Of course, he is kind of old, but he is sharp as a tack. This man is just amazingly sharp. I'm very, very pleased to have him with us. Would you take it away, Roger?
Well, I think I'm on. Yes? So pleased to see everybody here. Our Dialogue employees, we have get-togethers about once every 6 months or a year that Bob Simons now is putting together, our attorney. And this we look at as another of our get-togethers that allow us to celebrate together. But this is a very special one for us. Now, the first thing that we're going to show here is a movie, a video that was made by ESRO, the European Space Research Organization, now called ESA. We developed, as you'll see later on, software for Lockheed, or for NASA, for Meldata at NASA, that was installed in all of the NASA centers around the country earlier in 1968. And we extended that software and installed it at ABC and several other places, the last one of which was ESRO. And ESRO was really pleased with that, so they made a video. But what it does, it transitions us from before there was computer online, and what searching meant and what literature retrieval meant in those days, to what we know with online retrieval as well. So maybe we can have the
you want to do that?
yeah, I meant to have this here. This, I don't think anyone here remembers the days When books were chained and retrieved by manually and kind of randomly, but this is just to lead us from way back into our movie.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Every day sees the publication of a mass of documents and reports in science and technology, which no modern company can ignore if it wants to keep its place or consolidate its position in a competitive environment. However, the problems are not solved by drowning the engineers and scientists under an avalanche of documents. The European space organizations offer them an automatic documentation system, the RECON.
We got the documents from the Space Documentation Service.
Thank you. The Industrial Topics from the Space Documentation Service.
That's right.
Industrial Topics, a monthly updating service, covers 100 selected subjects. It is disseminated to subscribers.
This reminds me, there's a literature search I would like to have them do on osmosis filtration. Could you see to that, please?
Yes, of course.
This research worker we've just seen has gained access to a vast reference system stored in a computer. No need to go to the library. Dial a phone number and you're able to browse through the files on a television screen. Thanks to a generous agreement with NASA, the European space organizations process a great number of reports and in exchange have gained access to the large documentation for the RECON system developed by Lockheed. Every month, NASA sends a copy of its tapes to the Space Documentation Service, more than 6,000 references per month. Since 1962, more than 500,000 references of scientific or technical results have been stored at the ESRO Computer Center. These references, generated in the course of space programs, don't only relate to aerospace, but cover the whole spectrum of science and technology. Network is now running across Europe, which will have great impact on the progress of science and technology.
Vous avez ça, Ron?
Hello.
Hello, Darmstadt?
Pronto Darmstadt. Madrid. Passatemi il telefono.
Can I have a recon?
Hello Darmstadt.
Hello, here, München.
Hello, Darmstadt. This is Paris. Could you load RECON for us, please? Thank you.
Automation allows men to face the information explosion and frees them from the servitudes of over-specialization.
So if you notice, that preceded the ARPANET. So I think that's very, very interesting. and it was based on dialogue. So.
Just an aside, on that particular point, we'll be going back retrospectively on some of the development work. But there were 5 of us that went over from Lockheed to Germany with a tape full of software that we installed on some 360-40s, I believe, that were in Darmstadt. And then we helped put the network together, which was just quite incredible. Considering it was before we had packet switch networking, before we had ARPA, before we had the internet, and yet they were in full operation over there. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, this will go back.
Let's see, so we can raise the screen now. We can go ahead. Any thoughts you had initially, Roger?
Yes. Well, what I'd like to do is go back to how the whole thing got started and how it got put together, because that's what happened right here in the building next door. I went to work for Lockheed as a summer hire in 1960 between roles and the dissertation. And I worked for a fellow, the head of information processing. His name was E.K. Fisher. Has anyone ever heard of E.K. Fisher? Well, he was a wonderful man. And as a summer hire, we defined a couple of projects. One was in simulation, computer simulation of cognitive processes and physical processes, and the other was information retrieval. I did some fairly significant work in simulation, which led to a dissertation, but that's another story, and moved into information retrieval. And at that time, we had 70, 90 computers that were tape spinners. Cards in, print out, no interaction other than the guy with the keyboard, the guy with the computer keyboard. And we had meetings all over the country on information retrieval. How can you use a computer to help find documentation? So with that, a revolutionary thing occurred, and that was the advent of the 360 series by IBM. What made that, and this is a picture of our little 360 computer, but what made that important was that the 360 series had mass random access storage capability. So instead of spinning tapes, you could go up and grab documents. It had interactivity. You could work from a computer terminal to do processing, kind of like cloud processing on the computer. It had telecommunications, which meant that you could develop a worldwide system with that telecommunications capability. You saw that illustrated in the video. So, my golly, what a perfect opportunity. There were a number of batch retrieval services around the country at the time, and when I learned about the 360, I thought, my golly, we can just leapfrog over all of those businesses. We don't have to recall back or anything like that, because we can produce a system that will really be responsive. Herschel Brown, who was the executive vice president of Lockheed, LMSC, backed the idea and allowed Lockheed to set up an information sciences laboratory here in building. It was called 201 then, it's the building next door. And we got the second 360 computer that IBM manufactured now. And we used that for the primary development of dialogue. I had a team of 5 guys. Ed Estes was our architect. Bob Mitchell was our systems engineer. Ken Liu, we couldn't live without. He was our BAL, Basic Assembly Language Programmer. You'll see why that was important when I tell you how much memory there was on this machine. And Jim Brick, who was our telecommunications person, and a fellow named Lynn Fick also. That 36030 computer had, anybody want to guess how many gigabytes of internal memory?
0.025.
Anyone want to guess how many megabytes of info?
Like 20 gigs.
How about 16?
Let's get down to kilobytes. We had 32 kilobytes of memory. And that's what Ken Liu did the programming on. Ed did the configuration. I did the systems design. I decided that we wanted a system that would allow the user to see the vocabulary, see a listing of the vocabulary in the database, along with the number of postings for that vocabulary. This was important in a number of ways. That it would be interactive, that someone at a terminal could issue commands and cause the retrieval to be done. And then third, that it would be recursive or iterative, that when you got a set of results out, you could learn from those results and modify your previous expressions as opposed to having to rekey them. In other words, we saw search as a process, not a probe. The systems today see searches as a probe.
So, Roger, that iterative aspect, was that an initial idea of yours, or did that kind of evolve? Because to me, that is so central, that is so key to this whole thing.
Well, that was fundamental. That we went into it that way, and Ed Estes designed the file systems, which Shelley will be telling us about a little bit later, that allowed us to design commands that would work back and forth, pull up material, let you look at it, take terms out of the material that you looked at, put it back into your search expression, and I used to.
To me, that's the part when I saw that it was iterative from the outset. I mean, that really blew me away.
Well, that was very important, and you don't have that much today, I don't believe. I used to, at Lockheed, what I would say, it's like a guided missile rather than a ballistic missile. It was hard to get them to understand really what we were doing. We were doing with esoteria, information, bits, data, whereas the Lockheed was dealing with very physical things that made different kinds of reports than a typewriter. Let's see, so that worked out. And we were still, let's see, the Air Force had a list of priorities that they would sponsor with independent research. One of those priorities was called information retrieval. So that kind of got everybody going. But with our little project, this is before we started the project, we did research and went to meetings and talked about a lot of things. And I knew that independent research was not permanent. In fact, it would probably be drying up. And that we better do something substantive if we were going to stay alive. So I knew there was this very large database at NASA, and the key person in charge of it, name was Mel Day. So I made an appointment with Mel Day and went back to Washington and told him about this great system that we had. Well, at that time, it was just a kind of a prototype that would luckily work from time to time. And he said, well, he said, people tell me they have systems that'll read my mind, you have to show me. I said, okay, Mel, you give us, you loan us your database, we'll put it up online and then we'll demonstrate it for you. In fact, I'd like to give you an unsolicited proposal to put it into operation at Ames Research Center. Well, we got the database, Dexter Schultz, our other member, loaded it online, and we did the prototype in 1966 or 67, 68, right in there. And after that, NASA came out with a system-wide RFP, request for proposal, for the RECON system. Well, the specifications for that system were very little different from what we already had in Dialog. So we were able to bid it very competitively against computer sciences and a lot of the other really big outfits at the time. And we won the award. So we developed that for NASA, and Mel Day, we have a little video of Mel already here where he describes the move from a batch system that they had, a second generation system, to an interactive system and why they did that.
So we've got on the screen a search example. We can come back to that if you want.
Well, I don't find it.
Okay.
I don't find it very interesting, but it's just it's a hypothetical search example that shows that you create sets. I always thought you do a select command that defines a subset of the database. Then you want to be able to split that subset into other subsets, or to take another subset over here and merge it with the set you're dealing with. And this little search shows you doing that. You do a select, you get some items, you take a look at the output, you find some additional terms that you might have used, you include those terms, and then you get more specificity and broader coverage. So that's what I'm very much.
Should we run the Mel Day then?
Let's do the Mel Day thing.
Yeah.
He is quite articulate.
One of the problems we had with a batch type system is that it was slow, and it was impossible for the person with the question to interact with the database. He would write his question down, he would send it down to the computer room, they would batch the questions. If he had a halfway decent priority, he might get the answer back in a day or a week or 2 weeks. And then when he got the answer back, he would usually have to modify his question, and this was very, very time consuming. So we decided that in order that we should have an interactive system, and so that the individual with the question could interact with the database, get an answer back essentially immediately, and then move on from there. And we made a study of the field at that particular point in time. This was in 1960. And we decided that the dialogue team at that time, the Roger Summer team at that particular time, was the best qualified to do the job. And we asked them to produce a system which we called NASA RECON. But there was some relation to dialogue. And it was to be used by NASA at its central facility in Washington, and it would provide online interactive service to all of the NASA centers around the country. And that went active in 1965.
And Roger, by the way, I popped an additional slide in here with the early 300 baud acoustic coupler.
Yes.
Anyway, remember the old days when, yes, many of us have dealt with these things. I thought I'd throw this in because I'm sure you dealt with it.
You know, when 300 baud was fine because the prints went very slowly and we were charging by connect time. But then 1200 baud came along and we thought we'd go broke. But well, anyway, just to follow along with the narrative here, we retained rights in the software we developed for NASA, the RECON software, which was really Dialog. So we had two systems that were identical, moving along, Dialog and RECON. And we installed RECON in several other government facilities under contract. ADC was one, a couple of others. And I was looking around for databases, and I saw that there was a database called ERIC, the Educational Resource Information Center database of educational stuff. And I thought, gee, that's a database we ought to be able to, get a contract with too. So I talked with a fellow named Lee Birchnell and Harvey Marin. They were head of ERIC, and said, we'd like to install Dialog on your computer, okay? They said, no, we don't want Dialog on our computer. We'll put our database on your computer and then access it from our ERIC centers around the country. Well, that was a great revelation because we went from a contracting organization where you have a contract that lasts a while and then it terminates and you lay off some people and you get another contract, you hire people and so forth. We went from there to a services business, which is kind of addictive. People get to using it and they find benefit from it and they don't stop. They just keep going. So we were able to build on that services business in just a wonderful way. and we built staff. I don't know what our next pictures look like.
Well, we got
Oh,
6
here's
early
here's some early guys, yeah.
And here's even a Rogers Summit without a beard.
Well, and before I bleached my hair. But I think you see Shelley Giles in the back there. He was very early on, and I don't remember, we inherited a marketing person from Dialogue, our marketing, Barbara West. Yeah, Geoff is our memory person.
I have to say, Roger, you're 89 years old and your memory is incredible.
It's indelible. So this is when we started building up staff. We were able to do that. And as we then also build up databases. And Geoff is going to talk about how we went about that as well. I think that's about the end of my little treatise for the moment.
Thank you, Roger.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I used to play trombone, so it was very important to know how to use a microphone at times. And in fact, Roger and I had known each other in the 60s because we played trombone in the same jazz band. And I was on the road with the Woody Herman Band in 1973. Roger came to one of our concerts, and he knew I had been a computer programmer before. And he mentioned that they were hiring, so in the summer of '73, I joined Dialogue.
Well, I mean, I knew you were playing, and so I went backstage at intermission, and I asked you how you liked the road work, because any musician always would aspire to be on the road with Woody Herman playing, I mean, in a band. Geoff said, well, I'm getting a little tired of it, so I said, come on down, let's have an interview.
That's right. Turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. And Woody was one of the 2 best bosses I ever had, and Roger was the other. The thing that struck me most, thinking back 45 years now, was I had worked in large IT departments before coming to Dialogue, and they almost never got anything done. Had lots of meetings, lots of documentation, lots of indecision, and lots of staff. And but it was very cumbersome. When I came to Dialogue, there were only half a dozen of us, and we got fantastic things done in just a matter of days. When I first came to Dialogue, I was handed a couple of reels of tape and boxes of cards, and we had to punch programs on the card decks. And this fellow sitting next to me was my godsend. He really showed me the ropes. I was able to get first business file, program for conversion. We used PO1 for that purpose, and load it for a test file, and then load it on the commercial service within a week. And in those days, you could do that.
Well, Geoff, when you first came to work, I think you actually were the nighttime computer operator for the service, weren't you?
That was one of the jobs that I had. You had to wear many hats. You had to be multifunctional, and I think Roger received a complaint once from Dr. Capio.
Ray Capio.
Yeah.
Ray Capio. Does anyone know Ray Capio here? Oh, good. I know that Rosalie does too. But Ray didn't ever use the telephone. When he wanted something done, he went out into the hall and shouted. And I was down in Office 39 in the building there, and I heard this, Roger, come down here. Of course, you got to slow down. He said, Roger, we have a bit of a problem because some of our scientists work late at night, and they've been hearing strange noises coming through the ventilator system. And I said, oh, I suspect I know what that is. And he said, will you take care of it? What was that, Geoff?
Well, I think it probably sounded like a dead cow. But it was, I would take my trombone into the computer room. And so I could practice while we were running large parsing programs. And then there was one rather eccentric mathematician who, he only liked to work at night. I mean, he was there overnight every night, and he was the one who complained, I highly suspect. So were you going to ask me about the rapid buildup of databases? Yes. Rapid buildup of databases, Jeff. But you can see the slide here. The team worked very, very efficiently, and the service grew geometrically. We were contacted by customers, by secondary database publishers. We met people and networked through a growing number of conferences, professional society conferences, and increasingly more and more people wanted to have their database on Dialog because it was extra money, extra revenue for them. And we had a really good set of boilerplate licenses that Lockheed lawyers had developed for us. And Roger and another gentleman initially did most of the database licensing, but as the service grew, those of us in development, product development, wanted to take charge of the development of licensing and participate in all aspects of the database load. And it turned out to be an awful lot of fun because we could specialize in certain areas. I know Peter Ruch is here tonight. He was brought in early on and built up our chemistry and patent database section. The only problem was you would go through the process of developing a test file, negotiating a license, loading the full file, and then you got stuck with monthly updates. And so this was a little bit like being Mickey Mouse in the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You had this tremendous workload. We were always understaffed, but we loved it. And we also built up the customer services department, which was also understaffed, but they worked like crazy too, because not only did we have to develop the product, but we had to train people to use the product. And I think that this really was a testimony to Roger's management, because we never really cost Lockheed investment money. I think we were always profitable. And Roger had a maxim, which was profit was a constraint. We always generated at least 10% profit. And then that, as the service grew, enabled us to add staff. The other thing that I remember was early on, somebody asked Roger to develop a mission statement. And he thought about it and came back the next day and said it was to collect and disseminate the world's recorded knowledge. And I thought that was a great vision.
That is really beautiful.
The only other thing that I want to mention at this time was I only heard, Roger's a very modest person, and I was at an online conference. Roger was on a panel. This was in New York back in the 70s. And I think Carlos Cadra, one of our competitors, was there. And somebody asked Roger, he says, "Roger, have you ever made a mistake?" And Roger says, "Yes, I think so." "Well, what was that?" "I didn't buy Dialog." So is there anything more that you wanted me to go into, Roger?
No, I think that's about it. In terms of
I didn't break my trombone.
You'd be in for a treat if you did, I'll tell you that. He's still playing, he's playing in jazz bands and rehearsal bands all over the place. So,
But by the way, I added a slide here. We used this from the presentation a year and a half ago about many of the different societies whose documents are indexed. And of course, IEEE is amongst these, and I'm not sure when this step was accurate, but it's, I think, certainly representative.
yeah, what I wanted to mention, those of you that haven't looked at the poster that's outside, that will give you an idea of the databases and the coverage that we had in Dialog in 1987. It's just on an easel out by the door. And it's just amazing that these guys were able to put that together, because each database we got was in a different format. I mean, there wasn't any standardization of how you describe them, how the elements are described at all. And they were able to convert them to a standard format that then our programs could use for loading it. It's good.
Let's see, did you want to talk about those people in this?
Yeah, these are the product guys. Well, these are some of the top brains in the organization. I mean, we had the three different product groups: business, sciences, and mother, and they're represented there, Pete, I see. I mean, I know he's there, I can't see him. And Geoff, and Fred Zappert was a PhD computer science guy, and he was our forward looker. And he's no longer with us, but he went to work for Google, as did several other people, actually, on Dialog.
Interesting.
Yeah, Fred was interested in electronic banking, which people were telling would never work.
Should we go to the technical side now?
Sure.
I joined Dialog in 1971 and walked into an office and they said, here, this is the system that works today, and it's going to grow. I don't know how he knew this, but Roger would tell us this system is going to grow. We started out, as he described, a Model 30, 2 disk drives with 7.25 megabytes per drive, and a data cell device, which is a very strange machine that IBM developed. 400 megabytes, and it can't possibly work. Other than that, and if it did work, it would break down in reality. It didn't. But that's a picture of a 2311, 5 platters, 14-inch diameter, and a great big case, and there was an even bigger case that was the control unit that had to be present for up to 8 of these drives. That is a picture of the data cell drive. IBM took 7 years to develop it. It's the only piece of equipment that IBM developed that came with kitty litter. It had hydraulics, air pumps, magnets, all of it had to work. And 5 gallons of oil you don't want under the floor in a computer room. And it was with that we had to start. When I got there were actually 3 drives that would hold 29 megabytes. And very soon they were full. And I took a look at it and said, well, these files are laid out in very nice ways to check what's happening if something goes wrong. You can read the data, even though some of it was in binary. Let's get rid of anything we don't need. If we can recreate it, we have a very small number of users. We're processing 1 command at a time, and then going to check if anybody else has something for us to do. And so it was try to find a way to put more data on this drive or in a data cell. And we managed to cut the files down like that, fortunately. And the hardware would get outgrown every year. And I think somebody went to Lockheed and said, give us an upgrade and it'll last for 5 years. And he did that for 5 years that I know about. And the first year we took that was a Model 40 when I got there, doubled the memory up to, I think it was 1/4 megabyte, and added more data cells. The computer room we used was shared with another Lockheed department, and it was getting a little crowded. In 1972, I think they built another computer room across the hall, and we evicted the other department. And that was going to be good for 5 years. 1 year later, we moved out of that computer facility into what was a cafeteria. Great big beautiful room. And they tore out the computer room that we had shared. And the following year, we moved across the hall and added some more space for data cell drives. Data cell drives are about the size of a commercial refrigerator. Pretty big. And we had 20 of them, which is, what, 8 to 10 gigabytes. And this picture was, I took a 8.5-year vacation. I got burned out a little bit.
This gets into a later part of the story.
Yeah, this is a new building.
Yeah, wait.
I might be going too quickly.
Yeah.
I'll go back.
But we had in the early years, we had some problems. File structure. We can talk about file structure for just a little bit. We had a list of all the search terms and where those terms occurred. We call that our inverted file. We had a linear file, which was the original documents formatted in our format, so we could display them in many different ways based on what the searcher wanted. By taking out some of the easy-to-read data, we could cut the inverted file by over half. And by compressing the data, which was small characters, little tiny records, equivalent to a card catalog, if any of you still remember that process. That was, we could get down about a third of the storage, which we didn't need, because we could compress the records, and we did. And the weekly or monthly updates was all new data originally. We never had to worry about taking anything out of the existing database. We sort of added to the end. And Roger would go find more databases. I think at the early, we got up to 10 or 12. And at that time, I think Roger said, we have half of the world's data. What more can we do? But you would find bigger databases, weekly updates. Finally, some databases needed to change old records for some reason. So we had to take the old ones out and put new ones in. Interesting process. We've been doing that for a little while, but we didn't know it. But they were also very successful in getting lots of new users. So now we have multiple commands, but still the computer was pretty fast until they got more customers. I don't know why you would do that. But more customers, more databases. The little databases would get bigger with time. It got to be a hassle. Originally, we had the searching done only during the day, U.S. day, and somebody found customers in other countries. They didn't want to wake up during our daytime hours, so they've got more users. Small development staff, you can count them on one hand. And computer time was really great for development. You could work anytime you wanted as long as dialogue wasn't up. Afternoons and evenings and early mornings. And the goal was originally to just get the data added fairly quickly and reduce the disk space. Because we saw the writing on the wall. We were going to have more databases. And the goal was to compress as much, get rid of data that we could recompute on with computer time and save disk space.
Yeah, more customers. We got our customers in Europe starting about 1973, 74. We dominated Europe. We were the only service in Europe. Then we took over Japan. We were the only service in Japan. So we were operating then around the clock, and we got more computers, and it built up to a point that Lockheed decided they should not have an operating system in a research laboratory anymore. And they decided to give us a new facility, which they did, which was over on Hillview Avenue, 3251, I believe. And
3460, right?
Okay.
Is this a groundbreaking for that facility?
Yeah, that's the groundbreaking. And we moved over there in 1981. At the same time, we spun off, or Lockheed spun us off as a separate fully owned subsidiary. That meant that we could start hiring our own people as opposed to inheriting them from Lockheed or having to use Lockheed services in legal and personnel and HR. We developed our own organizations that way. That helped us move ahead very efficiently.
If I can add just one comment. Roger was the driving force behind Dialogue. Dialogue would not have existed without Roger. It would not have been successful without Roger. And I remember very vividly that his mandate was that Dialogue was going to be excellent in all areas, in the software, in the search performance, in the operations, and in the customer services. We didn't have a large marketing department, but we really did focus on customer services and Dialogue, and I think some of the next speakers will be addressing some of that.
I'd just like to interject that. When I was doing graduate work at Stanford, I took a course in operations research. And we looked at strategy formulation and operations research and this strategy, that strategy, and so on. The one strategy that always came out on top was called a dominant strategy. And that is, you don't say, I'm going to be better here and we won't care about this and so on and so on. You dominate across all aspects of your business and then you get ahead. So that's what we did.
Fantastic. Well, as you can see, by 87, after that groundbreaking, 300 employees there. And I'm sure many of these people in that picture are in the audience right now.
I can see a few of them there right now.
So let's see, we've got a couple more pictures here.
Well, I think I have to finish up with, take it up to the Night River days.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were spun off as a wholly owned subsidiary in 1982, I guess it was, 81 or 82, we thought that was great. Anyway, we started operating then. And then about 1987, I got a murmuring that Lockheed was thinking of putting Dialogue up for sale, that it was a saleable commodity. And so then we realized, of course, that the reason that we were spun off in 81 was so that they'd get 5 years of auditable returns that they could count us with on the market. Well, we wanted to do a management buyout, an MBO. So Bob Simons and the fellow named Bill Lawrenson and I and a couple of outside people did a lot of scheming and calculating and decided we could make an offer of $200 million and carry enough debt service with our profitability to pay that off and not go under. So I went to visit Vince Marafino, Lockheed Financial Vice President, explained this all very carefully to him. He said, how much are you going to offer? I said, well, $200 million. I think we can do that. And he said, we can do a lot better than that. Anyway, so Lockheed went into a Goldman Sachs auction, which is a story in itself that I won't take time with here. But we went through several layers of offerings from interested parties. The first one, we probably had a dozen people that expressed, companies that expressed interest. And then we winnowed that down with a Goldman Sachs guy whose name was Tyler Sykes. He was a Stanford Business School graduate and is actually an executive with Goldman Sachs now, a young guy. But it finally winnowed down to, we gave full-day briefings to the companies, to about 5 companies that are still interested. And then it was up to them to submit a best and final bid according to an RFP that we put out. And Lockheed was too busy to write the terms of that agreement. And so Bob Simons, who's in the back of the room here, said, well, okay, we'll do a draft of it, and you can review that and see if that's good. Well, we wrote an incredible contract document that had continued all the benefits that there were for the employees. They couldn't be fired. That the final offer they made was non-negotiable. And then there came a day in August down in Calabasas when all of the bids came in and we were opening the envelopes. And Night River was the top bidder, 353 million. And Vince was right. They could get more than our $200 million that we had offered. But the most interesting thing with that was the second bidder. The second bidder for Dialogue was a man called Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, who had had an information company or two and was interested in broadening out. Robert was a notorious crook. He had been a member of Parliament. He had been expelled as a member of Parliament in England. He owned newspapers there, but he was just a gracious, warm, gracious man. And at a meeting during the time this was going on, he said, Roger, he said, we really won't dialogue. And if we get it, I will set up an account for you with $12 million in it. I said, thank you. I mean, of course, I had no influence on the award. It was pretty much strictly top dollar. There's a whole interesting story that should be written about that process sometime, but that's enough. Knight Ridder was a popular. Jim Batten was the CEO of Knight Ridder, a wonderful man at the time, and he had a vision of getting online. This is a picture of the signing of the contract with Knight Ridder. Jim unfortunately died about 2 years into the Lockheed contract, and the people that were in charge then, Tony Ritter, who was really newspapers full swoop and didn't have that much interest in dialogue. So I think, you know, they decided that they would divest dialogue from themselves, and I retired about that same time. So that's the end of what I have to say.
Where's Knight Ridder today?
Knight Ridder.
Where's Knight Ridder today, Roger?
I think Knight Ridder is a past dream.
Anybody watch Dexter?
Well, I thank you to the first set of our panelists here, Geoff and Shelley. Thank you very much. So, Elizabeth, great to see you again. You were part of our panel a year and a half ago. And you've been involved with customer relations and product management and lots of organizational continuity. Would you like to talk about that with regard to the panel?
I would. And I want to preface it by saying that I think the reason that Roger wanted me to be here and Martin too is because we represent the information professional community. That's our roots, that's who we are. When I started at Dialog in 1983, which was way after all the good stuff, you know. By then, Dialog was the leader in the industry. I was a fairly young woman, and I was absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Roger directly and be in charge of marketing. But our whole focus in marketing was oriented around realizing that information professionals were the ones who were going to make Dialog what it became globally as the leader in the industry, because it was a perfect match between what information professionals needed to do, which was provide just the right information at just the right time at a possible price for the scientists, the engineers, the academics who needed that information. So it was a perfect marriage between Dialog and our profession. So the other reason that Roger asked me to speak is because I somehow managed to last through multiple transitions, including the Knight Ridder transition. The Knight Ridder days were good days for us. Knight Ridder wanted to digitize. They had all these newspapers that were, of course, advertising-based print vehicles. Oh yeah, that's a picture of me at my younger days. And with me is Barbara Anderson, who was another beloved member of the Dialog team. She ran customer services at the time, and I was doing marketing. So we were a team together, supporting the customer community. So the Knight Ridder goal to digitize their content, they believed that they could get there by acquiring a bunch of information services companies, of which Giles was one. They invested heavily in us. We developed, our product team went wild with this kind of new investment. This is an example that you see here of all the different tools and software products that were created over in the Knight Ridder era to make it easier to use the command line system. Because although the command line system was powerful, it was difficult to understand. You had to really study it up to be effective. So we tried our best to put tools in place that would make it easier for different types of information users to use it, and succeeded. The market grew, the service grew rapidly during those years. But ultimately, Knight Ridder needed to focus on the news. I think part of that was the loss of Jim Batten, their vision changed. They focused on newspapers, and they divested us. And there were many companies interested. In the end, a very small company, about 30 million, about 1/10 the size of Dialog at the time, purchased Dialog, and we went through a very difficult time because we had to service a huge debt. It goes back to what Roger said earlier. How much can you sustain? Well, you can't sustain that kind of debt and service your customers. So it was a difficult time.
How much did they pay for Dialog?
You know, I am not 100% sure, but it was certainly over $400 million.
Yeah, it's around 400, which I recall, 425.
And it was completely leveraged. They didn't have it because they were such a small company. They had to borrow all that money, so it was an unsustainable debt. Fortunately, we were saved when another company came along, the Thomson Organization, a stable, well-run industry leader, acquired Dialog. We had good management. We had an environment which sustained us. And those were also good years. But in the long run, the Thomson environment was one where each business, they had subsidiaries, one for legal, one for financial, one for scientific, and so forth. Dialog covered all of those areas. Our whole mission was to be multidisciplinary and enable the user to cross all of this different kind of content. We just didn't fit that well in Thomson.
Is there anyone from Thomson here?
It's funny you should say that, Roger. I was going to say, Roy, where are you? Roy, just stand up for a moment. Roy was our president during much of this period, and he was a great leader. Thank you, Roy. Roy did everything he could to support us in that environment, including supporting us in reaching out more to information professionals. That was something I was proud to do. But in the long run, it wasn't the best match. And we found finally, in 2008, we were acquired by ProQuest, which is another leader in the information industry. And ProQuest's world is the aggregator world. So that was an environment in which we could succeed. We were well aligned culturally and technically. Over a 4-year period, ProQuest managed to bring us to a modern platform. They moved us off the mainframe in 2013. Here we are at SLA, of course, that was our core market, Special Libraries Association, introducing this new platform. And we have a couple of people here today from ProQuest environment. Is Michael going to be introduced later? Michael, are you here? Yeah. Michael is the general.
Speech, I'm sort of in awe of what I have to achieve going forward. So hopefully I can carry on some. We'll do another presentation in hopefully 5 years.
Also, I wanted to give a special thank you to Michael because by way of ProQuest, they purchased the alcohol for tonight's event. Thank you very much.
So I just want to finish by saying a little bit about technology transition, if I may.
Please.
Over the years, Dialog, the mainframe environment in which Dialog lived, and the Dialog system grew and changed in that mainframe environment in miraculous ways. But at the same time, in the mid-90s, the internet came along and just changed the world. And it provided an entirely different market environment, entirely different technical environment in which services, online services that started in the 60s and 70s had to adapt. And that was part of the struggle and the challenge in each of the different owners that we had, as I mentioned earlier. We had to struggle with how do you sell premium content at a fairly high price when there's almost good enough for free.
And there was a lot of almost good enough information available by the late 90s and early 2000s. So it was a very challenging market environment to succeed in. And I think that the fact that Dialog still is alive today, servicing specialty premium content users in the areas of pharmaceutical patents and engineering, is a testament to the fact that sometimes good enough is not enough. You have to sometimes and that's why our information professional committee has been so valuable to us, because they're the ones that know that that's the case, and they have been the ones who have spearheaded the need for quality, precise, comprehensive information to our entire customer community. So I just want to close by saying thank you to my brethren of information professionals. Many of them are here in the room today.
Thank you, Marjorie. So Marjorie, you're an entrepreneur, and you use Dialog at NASA. Want to talk a little bit about that?
I did. So, am I on here?
You bet.
Okay. So, what I wanted to start with was a little bit about the societal impact of Dialog, because it's been considerable. And I did start at NASA, but I'll get to that in just a moment. But I think it has had an incredible impact on the society that we live in today, because it, as an information professional and one that has known Libby and Roger for many years, the STM market was a good place to start, because that information became available just instantly. So at NASA, which is where I was working as an information engineer when the International Aerospace Abstracts and the Scientific and Technical Aerospace Reports came up online on RECON. And so instead of going through all those books on the shelves that were in my office, I was able to access those over a remote terminal in nothing plaque. And it was mind-boggling. It was fabulous. And we had a whole new industry grow up. There was new meetings. There were new titles for people. So the information profession got its start. We used to have something called the Documental Association, and the documentalists, or what we were all called, and the American Society of Documentalists changed its name to the American Society for Information Science, because information science and information scientists were leading the way, and it became an incredible environment. It was exciting for everybody. All of the people in primarily corporate libraries to start with, and big government labs were able to get information that would take them weeks and weeks and weeks to gather. I mean, I was originally doing searches, and I would put together my search on the punch cards, and I would submit them, and then at night they would mount the tapes, and a week later I would get my results, and they'd be on 9-track paper, and then I had to cut them apart and put them into little booklets to deliver to my customers, and then they would look at those bibliographic citations and try via first the library, and if they couldn't get them there through interlibrary loan, to get the information for their research. So it took a long time, and it became, all of a sudden, there was at my fingertips, and I could deliver stuff very quickly to people. It was truly revolutionary. And there were a lot of new publications, online magazine, Searcher, online Searcher, Information Today. There were a lot of new meetings that came about. The national online meeting and the international online meeting followed it fairly quickly.
There's a magazine called Online Searcher?
There is.
Really? Wow, that's kind of interesting.
I can send you some copies. I've written articles in them.
Yeah, actually, just a quick flashback. When we knew that we were going online, we were doing online services, but we didn't know whether online was 2 words or a single word. And we used to debate that in the office, you know. Anyway, we finally went to online as one word, and that is stuck.
And indeed, when I was working on the citation for the milestone with Roger, we went through this thing, okay, is it going to be hyphenated? Is it going to be one word? So we actually, that was a debated topic. And I did some research work on it and found out when it became, you know, like the word today, T-O-D-A-Y, it used to be, it became one word. The same thing with online. So when it became pretty much standard, that we realized around the time contemporary to dialogue roughly, online became single word, then we decided that would be the reasonable thing to do. So that's part of the critiquing we did of that citation.
Well, I wrote an article in Online Magazine about the dialogue information system in 1979, and at that time the title was hyphenated with the online, and later it became unhyphenated.
And of course, people did both for quite a while.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, your spell checker wasn't happening yet.
Yeah.
So we had, a lot of the associations weren't so sure about this online stuff. It wasn't really a big deal. So they didn't want to have sessions about it. And that's why the other organizations grew up, because there was this huge groundswell of people that became searchers and super searchers who would teach other people how to search. And it was the cool kids, the trendy kids, were the ones who had access to the online terminals. And I got to be one of those. I was lucky.
And the whole subculture.
It was a new subculture, and it was a sea change in the way that we access information. It just, we weren't, well, I had a job searching, because I have a science background. My first activities were to go through chemical abstracts and biological abstracts, which were 18 volumes every 6 months. They were 8.5 by 11 pages. They were about 350 pages each. And my arms were not long enough to carry 6 months of that data to a table in the library so that I could search through the permuted indexes. And it would hurt my back by the time I finished going through 10 years of this stuff. So it was really fabulous that we were able to search so quickly. And I didn't have to go to the computer center. I didn't have to do the punch cards. And when I started typing in the teletype machines at 15 characters per second transmitted, so it was 150 baud, my fingers would get, I don't have long fingers, and my knuckles would get trapped in the double helix keys. So when we were able to go to one of those 733 ASRs that you showed with the rabbit ears, and that was a dual baud machine. Actually, that's a 300-1200 baud machine.
Thank you. We have an
I have one still in my office. It was a huge change, and particularly when it went to that one, which was only 17-pound machine, because I did training for NASA on the 45-pound machines, and I had to travel around the nation with those. But when it went to 17 pounds, that was lightweight. So if you complain about your laptop, let me
Let me just quickly ask you about when you were exposed to dialogue in this iterative refinement of the results. I mean, all this other stuff is cool, but to me that is the incredible frosting on the cake.
It was, well, except for disk storage overflow, Shelley. That was a problem for us. Every time I hit 600,000 characters in my search set, I got a disk stack overflow and I'd have to start over. But other than that, it was wonderful because I could do a set and then I could refine it. I could kick out the stuff that I didn't want. And instead of running a search and then a week later getting the results, I got them all at once. And I could keep refining it. So yes, recursive search is a fabulous tool, and most systems you can't do it on today. Dialog does not. Dialog allows you recursive search. Google does not allow you recursive search. Nor does Bing, nor does any of the, nor does Solar, nor does Lucene. None of them do it.
True. Just an interjection there. Our system was Boolean operators. We did and or not, and we did it through successive steps and so on. And if you realize an and is an intersection of two sets, and or is the merging of two sets, and not is the negation. But when Google does a search, they do an or. I mean, if you put in a bunch of terms, they do an OR, and then they have algorithms for what they put up front. But when they come back and they say you have 20,000 returns in half a second, well, that means that they've ORed together, merged all of the results from all of the terms that you put in, which isn't really very refining.
But dialogue went one step further. Not only could you do an and or and not in a recursive set, you could also do it by field. So you could say in the title or in the keywords or by author or by date. It was incredibly powerful. Nothing has replaced it.
Good.
Fascinating. Wondering, should we transition to getting input from the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a lot of former employees here. How would you like to proceed? Should we get users or former employees? Or?
Well, I think anybody. We have, customers. We have a lot of former employees, family and friends.
There are a couple people I would like to recognize first. We do have John Quebeca, who's the director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office in Silicon Valley. You know, there's 5 offices around the country now. So very happy to have you here, John. And you're here with 2 of your fellow employees.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And it's an honor to be here. So I've been at the Patent and Trademark Office for 30 years. So I guess I was one of the cool kids that got to stand in line and wait to use the terminals because I definitely did not want to search in paper. So I'm glad we've made that transition today where access is on every one of our examiners' desktops. I have 2 of my team members with me today, Brandy Zukanovich. So he's a patent examiner in the computer implemented business methods area.
Who uses dialogue.
Who uses dialogue.
And you're a former user yourself.
Oh, of course, yeah, I do. And Julie Mason, who's actually, she's one of our regional outreach officers here. She was a Patent and Trademark Resource Center librarian for a number of years and used to work at Dialogue. So
that's an incredible, wow, it's so neat.
So thank you for being here and congratulations. Thank you. So
yeah, great. I'd also like to recognize Angela Hay. She worked at Bell Labs and was an early user of Dialogue. I know Angela and John, her husband John Massey, by way of the Computer History Museum.
I was at Imperial College in London doing my PhD in about 79, I think. And Dialogue had a course in London to learn how to use the thesauruses and the words, as you mentioned, the fields by which you could search. The college librarian didn't want to go. She thought computers were frightening, and she said, I was doing operations research, and she said, you use the computer and you seem to use the library, would you like to go? And it was a bit daunting for a student because there were people from Shell and the Times and all these big organizations you'd heard about and might want a job with. So anyway, I had this 2-day course, and then I went to Bell Labs, and Bell Labs had an infinite budget for money, which was really good. And then I came out here and worked in a startup, but then I had to start a consulting business, and what could I do? You know, I had to subscribe to Dialogue myself. And I remember charging Bert McMurphy, who some of you may know was at one stage chairman of the board of trustees at Stanford and a venture capitalist. I remember charging him $4,000 for one night's searching, and he didn't flinch, you know, and you know, it was a lot of money. I was really incredibly grateful for being able to start my consulting business using Dialogue. And the other thing at Bell Labs was you were allowed 75 square foot as a member of technical staff for your office. I actually had the equivalent of 3 offices because not only did I subscribe to Dialogue, but Gartner and a whole lot of the library actually subscribed to Dialogue. But I needed all the blue sheets with all the words on it. I had to have binders of these things, and so I had binders of that, Gartner Group, IDC, all the rest in my office, and yeah, it was a very enjoyable system to use.
Thank you.
Hi. I'd like to thank Roger for hiring me over 40 years ago, and I managed to survive 40 years of Dialogue through 5 companies, and it's been a challenge and a joy, And thank you very much.
What's your name?
I should say that, so you had that.
Hi, my name is Peter Roosh, and in front of me right here is Hlava Hartwell, to whom we should attribute the blue sheet. This is a little bit out of order, but Marjorie, the one thing I thought you were going to talk about was proximity search. I thought you would.
Well, let's see, any other input from the audience?
I'll start with my name. It's Virginia Tucker. I went to work at Dialog in 1982. I beat Libby there by a little bit. At the time, I was an academic librarian at Stanford, and loved my job there. I was in physics, and met up with some people from Dialog. I was doing dialogue searching on campus. We had to share a terminal, and this was at Stanford where they had some money. So I went to work there and became a trainer, ended up coordinating the instructional programs at Dialog. I did some other things. I ended up in the product development area. And then things changed and I went in another direction. Now I'm a professor at San Jose State in the School of Information. And what I wanted to say is those years at Dialog were just transformative. And I'm teaching students now. I teach in a master's in library and information science program and a PhD in information systems program. I still love teaching about this. And what's transformative for my students is that a lot of them come in and they're there to do a master's degree and they still think there's some kind of man behind the curtain at Google. In fact, if you want to see some good videos, you should watch that college comedy YouTube channel about the guy at Google who's actually there answering all those questions, displaying those search results pages. But I love teaching this stuff. I teach database design, I teach information architecture, which is another one of the jobs I did at Dialog. And it's exciting and it's important for people to know about, to know that there isn't just a man behind the curtain in that basic white box. And I still can get pretty riled up when I see Google taking away things like proximity searching and taking away the advanced search form where it used to show you what was being built in the search. So I'll stop there because if I keep going, I'll just keep going. But this is important stuff. I mean, search is a daily activity for, certainly in the first world, multiple times a day. We can hardly help ourselves from searching. So it's important to understand a little bit about how it works.
Thank you. I think that comment was a nice segue into our last slide here. This is a quote from Peter McMorville's search patterns book. And do you want to talk about this, Roger?
No, not especially. I stole it from Elizabeth from a presentation that she and I did last Monday at the Special Library Association group. I thought it was very appropriate just in summarizing and characterizing what dialogue is and what it means.
Yeah, and it comes down to its name, because it's enabled a conversation between the computer and the user. Simple as that. I mean, think about that.
Now that, I have to tell that story.
Okay.
When I decided we had to get off of independent research and build a product, Ginger and I were driving up to visit her parents in Portland, and Jennifer was a small child at the time. That must have been about 1965, 66 maybe. And so I had a voice-activated Sony tape recorder. Ginger was driving, and I dictated the proposal that led to the formation of Dialog. But we couldn't figure out what to call it. What should we call this damn thing? And we said, well, it's an interaction between computer in the person. It's like a dialogue. So that's where the name originated. Jennifer doesn't remember that. But that's where it came from. The proposal was accepted. I inherited the 5 guys that I mentioned before to do the programming, design, the work, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I think it's time to actually unveil our milestone plaque.
Oh my.
Yep, let's go do it. So we have Tom Alto, and I want to stand by us, Roger, and also Keith Moore from IEEE. So I'm going to read the citation from the plaque before we unveil it here and have our official dedication. So this is the DIALOG Online Search System, 1966. DIALOG was the first interactive online search system addressing large databases while allowing iterative refinement of results. DIALOG was developed at Lockheed Palo Alto Research Laboratory in 1966, extended through contracts with NASA, and offered commercially in 1972. Its speed, ease of use, and wide range of data content attracted professional users worldwide, including scientists, attorneys, educators, and librarians. DIALOG preceded major internet search tools by more than 2 decades. Gentlemen, would you like to unveil the plaque? Here we go. So, just to give you a little bit of background, it says May 2019 at the bottom, which of course is right now. That dates it. And there will be an identical plaque to this that will be located at the Computer History Museum on that wall. Now this plaque will also, I believe, go next door. I'm not sure if it's been decided yet. Is it clear where it will go? Do you know, Tom?
It's probably going to go to the law building or next door.
Right. So one of these 2 buildings in the lobby, because it always needs to be in some physical location that's historically accurate for what is being honored. And either of these 2 buildings obviously is that. And so it's also going to be at the museum because that's the way we honor a lot of the local accomplishments here in Silicon Valley. So we've got that duplicate plaque there. So thank you, everybody. It's been a wonderful evening.